You can go ahead, Dean Cavalier.
And welcome to the RowanSOM Alumni Association's monthly webinar series. I am Tom Cavalieri. I'm the Dean of the Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine. This evening, we are pleased to bring our third event of our alumni webinar series, The Importance of Vaccinations in the Time of COVID-19. We are looking forward to an informative conversation about the importance of vaccinations during this pandemic, as well as an understanding of how vaccines are developed, tips for talking with patients about vaccinations and the flu shot, and the progress for potential COVID-19 vaccination. The format of this webinar series will include presentations and a question and answer session, all within approximately 1 hour. As a reminder, you may submit your questions at any time in the Q&A so they can be shared with the panelists during this session. It's now my pleasure to introduce our esteemed presenters and participants. First is Dr. Ginamarie Foglia. She is a 1993 graduate of our School of Osteopathic Medicine and the recipient of our medical school's Distinguished Alumnus Award. She has had over 25 years of healthcare experience as a board-certified internist and infectious disease specialist, medical epidemiologist, and professor of clinical medicine. She currently serves as the Global Senior Director, Medical Intelligence and Patient Perspective at Sanofi. Dr. Foglia received her MPH from Yale University and completed an infectious disease public health fellowship at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Georgia. She has served with the United States American Medical Corps from 2000 to 2005, attaining the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Dr. Foglia went on to serve in Kenya, where she led the U.S. military HIV/AIDS program, jointly sponsored by the National Institute for Health and the Department of Defense, conducting vaccine research, international surveillance, and infrastructure development. No wonder she received our Alumni Excellence Award. We're very proud of her. Dr. Rebecca Moore is a 2003 graduate of our school. She's a member of our RowanSOM Alumni Association board. She is an associate professor of family medicine here at RowanSOM. She's made significant contributions to our curriculum from many perspectives. She's certified as a family medicine physician. She's the medical director of our Rowan Family Medicine office in Hamilton and was very involved in the development of this new office that I'm very looking forward to seeing, but heard great things about it. Dr. Moore is also the course director for the PBL, H&P, and second course, HMP2 course at RowanSOM. Very proud of Rebecca as one of our grads as well. Dr. Overbeck is also a 2003 graduate of our school. He serves as an associate professor in geriatrics at RowanSOM. He's the program director for our geriatrics fellowship, which is now ACGME accredited. He is the vice chair for education within the Department of Geriatrics and Gerontology at our NJISA. He's board certified in family medicine and in geriatrics. He provides patient care to those residing at Lionsgate Continuing Care Retirement Facility and is one of our own healthcare heroes, caring for patients with COVID-19 during a very difficult time. He also makes significant contributions in many ways to our curriculum and is an outstanding role model for our students interested in pursuing a career in geriatrics. In 2019, Dr. Overbeck was selected as the RowanSOM faculty recipient of the Leonard Toe Humanism in Medicine Award. Also, I am pleased to introduce student Dr. Zareda Lormont, a member of our School of Osteopathic Medicine class of 2023, who will assist with today's program. Finally, I welcome our SOM team and thank them for hosting this program. Dean Machichi, of course, our Assistant Dean for Student Programs and Alumni Engagement. Ms. Gail Foreman, Senior Director for Development for the Stratford campus, and Ms. Brittany Quintana, Program Coordinator for Student Affairs and Alumni Engagement. Ginamarie, Rebecca, and Kevin, thank you very much for participating in this event. You know, I always say the best proof of success of our school is seen in our alumni. And I can't tell you how proud I am of all of you for the great work you're doing in advancing the mission of our school and reflecting so well on our school through the work you do as graduates in your respective fields. So thank you for joining us. We're proud of you, and we look forward to a very informative dialogue. Thank you. Well, who's first?
Hi, this is Ginamarie. If we can bring up my slides, please.
Okay.
Can anyone see the slides? There we go. Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Dr. Cavalieri, for the introduction. Also want to thank Gail Foreman and Dean Machichi for inviting me to join Drs. Overbeck and Moore in this very important Rowan School of Medicine event. Next slide, please. During challenging times, and even in the not so challenging times, I really believe that humor and laughter can be some of the best medicine that we can take. And I believe that you can certainly relate to these photos that my sister sent me a few months ago when we were on lockdown with COVID. And I know that my dog Moab is very happy, at least, that I can spend a little bit extra time with him. As my career evolved and I joined Sanofi, where I initially worked in vaccine development at the vaccine unit Sanofi Pasteur, I was asked to speak on the vaccine topic. However, I want you to come away from this knowing that there are several vaccine manufacturers, and it's the science and the regulatory authorities that really will inform and advance the next vaccine that we have in humans. Next slide. So let's get to it. What is a vaccine and how does it work? It's a substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or several diseases based on the vaccine. It's prepared from the causative agent of a disease, its product, or a synthetic substitute. It's treated to act as an antigen or a foreign body without inducing the actual disease itself. And it stimulates the proliferation of the immune cells that we have, T and B cells, relating in the formation of an effector cell, like a T lymphocyte that will kill a virus, or memory cells, as you can see on the right. And it's the formation of memory cells that's the basis for the relatively permanent effects of some vaccinations like hepatitis A and hepatitis B, where you get it once and you don't need a second vaccine. Now, what I wanted to stress here, when you look at the hundreds and thousands of years of advances that we've made in either vaccinology, public health overall, only clean water performs better than vaccination in reducing the burden of infectious diseases. Next slide. Now, to give you an idea of the journey of a vaccine, to let you know how complex the manufacturing process it is, I'd like to take you through a short video that was developed by Sanofi Pasteur. Again, please keep in mind that other manufacturers will go through a process such as this. So if we can roll the video, please. Thank you. Great. It looks like we're back. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video. It gives a really good understanding of how things work. I'd like to move to the next slide. So I believe that the organizers picked the perfect date for this seminar because actually tomorrow starts our Northern Hemisphere influenza season, and today ends the Southern Hemisphere's influenza season. And I wanted to give everyone an idea of the process of selecting the flu strains for each year. So the CDC and others have sentinel laboratories around the world, and they track what are the circulating strains and which ones should be included. They then have a meeting in February, and they then decide on what components should be added, and then they're given to the manufacturers to make their influenza vaccines. And usually when we have a vaccine, it includes protection for influenza A and B, depending on whether it's a 3-component or a 4-component or a quadrivalent vaccine. Now, vaccines can be either egg-based, or they cannot be made in eggs and be a cell or recombinant-based vaccines. I know that Dr. Overbeck's going to cover a little bit more for flu, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how we end up getting the strains that we have. And you can go on the CDC website to look at the strains for each season. Next slide. Also, what I wanted to do is give you an overview of the different COVID-19 vaccine platforms. I guess given my specialty, I get multiple news feeds almost every minute of the day regarding COVID-19 and vaccines. And currently, when you look at the vaccine and vaccine design, they can be described as falling into 2 camps. The one camp on the left, if you look at the classical platforms, basically are protein-based. And on the right, or the next generation vaccines, they are gene-based. And what I mean by that is the protein-based vaccines deliver the immune system stimulating antigen directly into the body. And you'll see that example with polio vaccines and others mentioned there. Whereas on the right, the gene-based vaccines carry the genetic instructions for the host cells to make the antigen themselves. And this mostly closely mimics a natural infection and what's being used mostly in the COVID-19 vaccine platforms. I'd like to call your attention to the center, and there we see a coronavirus schematic graphic. And the antigen of interest, the one foreign thing that we're introducing the body, that we want the body to make an antibody to, is that spike protein that you see there. Because that spike protein is what the virus uses to bind and fuse with the human cells. Next slide. Now, one thing that we have to consider is what can we do to mitigate the possibility we're now approaching influenza season, actually tomorrow, and we have a COVID-19 pandemic. What can we do to mitigate, quote unquote, what I call a twindemic of both? And the goal here really is immunization or vaccinate. And what we see here is we want to prioritize the pneumococcal and seasonal flu, especially in our vulnerable populations, our elderly, et cetera. But really, anyone greater than 6 months of age should receive the flu vaccine. While the flu vaccine is not effective against COVID-19, it's highly recommended. And the reason being is we already see that COVID has overwhelmed the hospitals in many settings. If we have a combined problem, that only makes it worse. We know that even in years where the vaccine has not matched perfectly the circulating strains, that we can still reduce hospitalizations and mortality in our most vulnerable people. So it's very important, and really I would recommend that you follow the World Health Organization and CDC guidelines. Next slide. Now, I like to be a realist in my world, and I try not to be a drama queen. So you have to look at the 100,000 view as opposed to sometimes being in the weeds. And this is just a reality check for all of us, and it's a comparison of COVID with other contagious infectious diseases. And if you look at your left axis, we see the reproductive number. And that means if one person's infected, how many people can they infect? That's on the y-axis. And the greater you go up on that line, the more infectious you are. On the x-axis is the case fatality rate, or the people that die, the actual percentage of people that die. And you can see, you know, COVID is sort of in the middle lower. But if you go all the way to the top, you see measles. And measles we have a vaccine for. And measles is the most infectious agent that we have. For every one person infected with measles, 18 will actually get infected as well. And the case fatality rate, excuse if I may, is nothing to sneeze at, as you can see. We have already eradicated smallpox in 1980 using a vaccine, and we're about ready to do that for polio as well. So just wanted to provide a little bit of relevance here. Next slide. So I started humorous and I'm going to end humorous. In 2020, we thought we'd have flying cars. Instead, we're teaching people how to wash their hands, and it's so true. So I would like to thank you for your attention. I will be moderating after our other presenters do their sections, and we'll look forward to taking your questions then. Thank you, and I turn it over to Dr. Rebecca Moore.
Thank you very much. And I'm guessing that I'm live and everybody can hear me. Oh, great. Okay. So with us, basically family medicine, vaccines are very important in our realm, as you can imagine, and we deal with them every day. So the question we get a lot is, for family medicine, why is it so important? The big thing is because basically we deal with all age groups, as you can imagine. So in our family medicine office, we deal with basically age 0 to geriatric age, pretty much. Now, Dr. Overbeck is going to be covering the geriatric population, so I will basically hand that over to him and stick with the younger population that we do see in the family medicine office. But it is very important that we address all the age groups that we see in the office. And the way I see family medicine, I basically describe to the patient as we're pretty much the gatekeepers of the families, as I describe it, the gatekeepers of medicine, right? We see the patients when they walk in the door. Not only do we take care of them for their acute illnesses, but we also take care of them for their preventative care, right? How do we prevent them from getting sick in the first place? Because that's our goal. We don't want them to get sick at all. We want to prevent complications in patients and keep them healthy to start with. And vaccines are a very important part of that, right? That we can keep them healthy if we can vaccinate them and prevent them from getting some of these diseases that are going to complicate issues that they already have and put them in the hospital. So we promote our vaccines in our patients pretty much from birth going on up. The other big part of family medicine is we talk to our patients about who is also living in the household with them. All right. So part of what we do is we do our intake, and not only do we address the patient, we address the household as well. Right. Who is in that house with the patient? Because that's also important. Right. Because we also have to see who our patients are being exposed to, and are they also vaccinated as well? That's just as important. Because our patients are vulnerable as well to whoever else is living in the home with them. So that is another aspect of what we do as well, is getting all that information for them. All right. So now the question is, what vaccines are important and what are we administering to our patients? And I believe we do have a slide, if you want to put it up. There it is. So as you can see on the slide, there is a number of vaccines that we have to be familiar with, and that we have to be on top of, as everybody's kind of like, what is all this on this slide here? All right. And this slide is just for children and adolescents. This does not approach our adult population. So as you can see, this starts at age 0 and goes up from there. So there are a number of vaccines that we do administer to our patients, and it is a series that we have to bear in mind here. However, they are important, and I do remind this to our parents when they do come in with their pediatric patients. All right. The other thing I do get a question of from a lot of parents is, can we give multiple vaccines at once? All right, because the parents kind of look at me like, can I give 2 vaccines at once or 3 vaccines at once? And the answer is yes. All right. We can give more than 1 or 2 vaccines at once. Another idea that we want to look at is the vaccinations is we want to make sure we get patients while they're there. Sometimes our patients do have transportation issues or they cannot come on time for vaccinations. when they're supposed to. So we want to make sure we vaccinate our patients while we have the chance to. So sometimes we do give multiple vaccines while we have our patients there when we can. As was already said, flu season is upon us. So this is one of our major vaccines that we are talking about right now with our patients because it has already started. And as I already mentioned, as you can see on the slide, we start promoting the flu vaccines for age 6 months and up. We also talk to our patients in their office, as I mentioned before, about who is in the household. It's very important for our patients to be vaccinated if they're going to be around newborns, because those newborn babies cannot be vaccinated. So we want to make sure that our patients are vaccinated, especially if they're going to have new grandchildren and they're going to be around their grandchildren, and vice versa. If our patients are children and they're going to be around their grandparents, right? Because we don't want them to get sick as well. The interesting part of what we're already seeing this year is in the past, whenever we brought up vaccines, we have had patients who have been hesitant. It's interesting that this year I haven't had as much pushback from patients, which it's been a nice thing to see. The patients have been asking more questions, which is also a nice thing to see because I've been happy to answer that for patients. And we've had good feedback about vaccines and more and questions and answer sessions with patients on this. Another nice thing is we've been able to come up with different variations of ways to give flu vaccines. One way that we have given vaccines this year that I think was successful and that the patients were actually very open to, and we got good feedback, was we actually did a drive-through flu clinic with Rowan. I know a couple of our offices did do this, where we actually had set up outside a drive-through, and the patients actually registered and they came through, and we gave them their flu shots while they were in their car. And the patients actually gave good feedback on that and were very open to that. So I think that the patients are receiving this a lot more open this year. And I think that the more information that we speak to with them about this, they're being more open about this and getting the vaccines as we speak to them about that. Pneumococcal vaccine is another important vaccine, but Dr. Overbeck is going to touch on this. This is also a very important vaccine to get as well. Another vulnerable population is going to be our college age as they go away to school. This has been a little bit different this year with college age children, as some of them have not been going away to school. But normally we do have our college age children that we're vaccinating for meningococcal vaccine, and this is also important as well. Another population that we also keep an eye on is our pregnant population. All right, so they are also our vulnerable population that we want to make sure are vaccinated correctly and that everyone around them is vaccinated as well, because we want to make sure that they are also protected. And with that being said, I will hand it over to Dr. Overbeck so that he can continue on in our elderly population.
Hello, my name is Kevin Overbeck. I'm a geriatrician, and the average age of my patients is 91. So when I see somebody in their 70s, I always think, like, you got another 25 years to go before you're elderly to me. So I know many people maybe in this audience are approaching 60, 65. I'm not sure. But you're kids to me. 65 is a child. I don't take care of 65-year-old people. I take care of they call them the old, when you're over 85, old. I don't know what you call them when they're 104. But those are my people, and they are lined up. They're already done, got their flu shots. We were able to vaccinate just under 200 in over a period of 2 weeks. And we really had to police the line to make sure they were 6 feet apart, because we had 4 separate days. We usually do it in 2 days. We had 4 separate days because we wanted everyone spaced apart, but people are eager in this patient population to get the flu shot. You can imagine everything I've learned about flu shots, about vaccinations, I feel like I learned from shingles and my experience with seniors in the shingles vaccine. you want to trust experts. I want to, but I don't always. It's not my natural way. I gotta sort of wrestle with things myself, see them myself. And with the shingles vaccine, I'm really cautious with seniors because I've seen them excluded from trials. So when they study a new medication, when they study a new vaccination, lots of seniors are kept out of those studies. So there are very few 90-year-olds who are in these kinds of studies before medication comes to market. So I'm very protective of them. And in 2008, a shingles vaccine came out called Zostavax. And few people had gotten it that I was taking care of. I really wasn't pushing it, certainly not in 2008. I generally had a saying, I want a medication out about 5 years before I start giving it to the old. And here and there, people got this Zostavax. And by 2012, 2013, we knew enough about Zostavax, the shingles vaccine, that you don't want to miss it. You don't want to get shingles. It's actually preventable. You don't have to get it. And so we held a clinic. I held my breath because we vaccinated 50 old seniors all, on the same day. And if they were going to have reaction, I was going to find out because I'm their doctor. So I was standing by the phone to see who would have a reaction. I was actually a little nervous giving out a mass population to a residential place. This place is called Lionsgate. It's a senior housing. It's got assisted living nursing home and an independent section. We vaccinated 50 people. And I was wondering what administration would say if I had to cart off half of them to the hospital. Everyone did fine. And one of the things I don't like about preventative health care, and vaccines are preventative because people don't get the disease, is that I don't get any credit. See, I get no credit. I used to get a lot of credit because people would come in with pain, and I would say, well, it could be a rib, it could be, something. And then I would examine them, and I was like, you have shingles. And I could give them the medicine to treat it. But now no one gets shingles because we vaccinated our population. Shingrix, a new vaccine, came out, really available January 2018, really available. And our people at Lionsgate, they wanted the vaccine. And we didn't wait 5 years. We had it within 9 months. We gave the residents Shingrix, the new vaccine, about 80 residents. Again, I'm telling you, holding my breath, something bad's going to happen. Please don't. And everyone was fine with the exception of 2. One woman said Shingrix is 2 vaccines. One you have to give it 2 different times, about 2 to 6 months apart. One woman said, I will not get another one. My arm hurts so bad. This is a Shingrix shot, is a vaccine that you got a shot that day. Your arm is sore. It's probably sore a couple days. But I haven't seen any shingles in 5 years. I used to see 5 cases a year, starting back in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. And by the time we did the Zostavax, 2013, no more shingles. 0. None. I get no credit. People say, oh, that one woman had a sore arm and she says she's not getting one. I'm like, I know, but there's like 5 cases a year that I'm not seeing shingles, and it's miserable. If you know anyone that's had shingles, miserable. So the things I learned about vaccines, I learned about shingles because it's a disease none of my patients get anymore. When they get it, if they get it, they don't have to get it. They shouldn't have had to get it. And the first thing is, why didn't you get in the shot clinic? So vaccines to me are really safe. And if you're over the age of 50, and certainly if you're over the age of 65, and you hear one thing from this presentation, go get your shingles shot. You don't want COVID and shingles at the same time. You don't want flu and shingles. There's never a good time for shingles. They estimate that about 1 in 3 lifetime risk, 1 in 3 people will get shingles. So you're going to play the odds that you're going to be the 2 out of 3 who don't. Get that shingles shot. You don't have to get that disease anymore. It's 90% effective, even in seniors. And you've heard about flu and the flu vaccine and effectiveness. some years 20%, some years closer to 50% effective. Shingles vaccine, 90% effective. 90% effective. And so that is a vaccine worth getting. Yes, you'll have a sore arm, but you won't have shingles. You won't have shingles. Two other vaccines seniors need to get, and really is a pneumonia vaccine called Pneumococcal 23, Pneumovax. It's got a bunch of different names. The confusing part is pneumonia really just means lung infection. You can get a lung infection from flu. You can get a lung infection from Covid-19. You can get a lung infection from just bacteria. You can get a lung infection from some of the pneumococcal type bacteria. And this pneumococcal 23 can help reduce your risk of that. And so all of our people have been, you only need one after 65. So they're all done. They're all done. So my people are well vaccinated, and I've been really listening because I don't really, my family, when I became a doctor, my family said, you really? I mean, you don't barely trust doctors. You know, you yourself, you know. And I said, I know. That's why I got to go study this thing. I got to go figure this out. And, you know, the shingles thing has really changed my approach. I get the flu shot, of course. I have to practice what I preach. But more than just what's good for me, it's as good for the people I take care of. I have to get the flu shot because I can't bring it into my building. I would love questions. I think we all would in the question and answer panel. So thanks for listening to my spiel.
We've actually received some really great questions. I'll start with, I had a terrible reaction to the shingles vaccine. I am worried about the flu vaccine. So what kind of advice would you be able to give?
Dr. Overbeck, I'll send that one your way.
Well, I mean, the flu, I don't know what your reaction was to the shingles vaccine. You heard about this one woman. She was 90 when she got it. Her arm was really sore. There was another person with a very sore arm. Some people's arm turned red, and it looked like if I didn't read about the reaction to shingles, I would have thought it was a skin infection. There was a redness that happened. It was pretty sore for about a week. It was way less pain than you would have with shingles. The trade-off is so worth it. But I remember 2 people had a reaction out of 80. A number of other people have had their second shot. Only 2 did not get the second shot because of the reaction. I'm not sure of your reaction. The flu shot is similar, but usually doesn't have that same level of reaction of intensity as the shingles shot. So you should be encouraged to get it. Protect yourself, protect your neighbor and your family. You could also try a little Tylenol after you get the shot if you're having discomfort.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to what Dr. Overbeck said. Well, the one thing is when we give a vaccine, we're looking to induce the body's immune response, right? So we're trying to rev up the body's immune response. And so when you see these localized symptoms or some systemic symptoms, like even a mild fever or something, it's showing you that the body is taking effect and that your body's immune system is building some sort of immune response. So that's the whole purpose of the immunization or the vaccination.
Thank you, Dr. Overbeck and Dr. Foglia. The next question is, are there any long-term effects of getting the vaccine? If so, why do you think the CDC doesn't talk more about it?
Maybe I can take this a little bit. So when a vaccine is being studied in a clinical trial, normally in a phase 3 trial where you're looking to prove efficacy, usually the mean amount of people that you study is 3,000. You know, that's kind of the expected. But in a lot of the vaccines that we've studied, like, for example, a lot of the COVID vaccines, you're looking at 30,000 people or 60,000 folks. And you're also looking at it for up to 2 years to follow up. But sometimes, you know, when you're evaluating a vaccine, if there's something really, really rare, and if you're in a 30,000 population, you may not pick it up. So what the CDC has recommended and what vaccine manufacturers, all of them do, is they started many years ago what they call the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. What that does is after a vaccine is pulled from the market, et cetera. And most of the time I can tell you in a meta-analysis I just reviewed over the past week, a meta-analysis when you look at a bunch of studies that review this sort of thing. In 25 vaccines over the past 20 years, there's only been one vaccine that has been recalled. So the safety has been very good, and that vaccine was RotaShield. That was for rotavirus, and because it caused intussusception, or the intestines kind of coming back on themselves. So the safety is actually quite good. It's quite good.
Thank you, Dr. Foglia. The next question is, I've heard news of a COVID vaccine which would shorten but not eliminate the time course of the infection. Why would a vaccine not be effective enough to completely eliminate COVID, and how can vaccines be improved?
I'll take that question as well, and I please defer to my colleagues as well if they'd like to add. So that's a great question. So one thing I want to share with everybody is, although there are really good vaccines like the Shingrix from GSK and Zostavax from Merck, et cetera, no vaccine is 100%, right? So there's always going to be those people that may not respond, and everybody's unique, you know. People's immune systems start to wane after the age of 40. So sometimes you can't get sterilizing immunity that you don't get infection. However, what we do find, and actually what we're seeing in some studies, is that you can reduce the severity of the illness that you do have because your body is able to mount a fairly good immune response when it is exposed.
Yeah, even a vaccine that's not 100% effective can still be really effective. You know, if a vaccine doesn't prevent 100% from you getting the virus, but it makes your symptoms less or go away less or makes you infectious less or keeps you out of the hospital, right? You still got the COVID-19, but you didn't go to the hospital because your symptoms weren't that bad. I mean, that's a huge success, and it could be really valuable. Shingrix is one of those really unique vaccines. Zostavax is like that. It was 60% effective, and every single person that got that vaccine didn't get shingles from me. I still had cases on the campus, but once we vaccinated everyone, 60% effective. Once we vaccinated almost everyone there, you know, who wanted it, I didn't see any more shingles. 60% effective, and it decreases over time to almost 4% effective. Zostavax after 8 years, almost not effective. That's why Shingrix came in right at the right time. 90% effective. That seems to be preserved at least 3 years. So even a vaccine that's not 100%, 90% is awesome and can be really, really impact our country, our neighbors, and the most vulnerable.
Yeah, I kind of compare it to similar as of if you think about it as Tamiflu, right? So if you get treated with Tamiflu, it doesn't make it go away, but it improves your symptoms and make it less severe. So similar to what Dr. Overbeck said, it's better to have less symptoms than have them as severe as they are.
What's so nice about immunizations or vaccinations as well is we're not just preventing infectious diseases, but we are preventing the sequelae of infectious diseases. For example, something that Dr. Moore deals with, human papillomavirus, right? So we're able to immunize younger women and boys to prevent them from getting cervical cancer or anal cancer, squamous cell cancer, and that sort of thing. And we are definitely seeing that cohort effect of less cancers because of human papillomavirus that was introduced years ago.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, what would be the requirements during a public health emergency to mandate a vaccine, and how would it be enforced?
I'll give a shout out of some opinion. I sort of on the fence one time about the flu shot. Okay, so what they said was, well, if you want to come to work, get the flu shot. So that's one way of enforcement, right? Employers making it necessary that you have the flu shot. So, is that right? Is that wrong? Well, I think in COVID-19 and especially right now, nursing homes, if you're coming to work there, you've got to get your COVID-19 shot if this is the place you want to work. Flu shot. Please don't come to work without a flu shot. So I think that how would they enforce it? How will mandates go? I don't know. I think there's a lot more questions, a lot more uncertainty than certainty. But that's one way of enforcement is through the employer.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think also, too, it depends on the risk-benefit profile and as Dr. Overbeck said, what population that you're going into. So I think part of it is almost a duty, a first do no harm. If we find that further on down the road we have a very effective vaccine, and these days actually you can look at the guidance that the FDA has provided for industry and vaccine manufacturers. They're looking at least 50% efficacy for the COVID vaccine because we don't have anything else, with a lower bound of the confidence interval being around 30. But they're looking at least a 50%. So if we can get that, that could really still, we believe, break the back of COVID spreading. So, as far as enforcement goes, I mean, the one thing where I think the social distancing and more of the government had an effect are in places like China and South Korea and those places. In the U.S., where we have more liberties, I think it may be more challenging to expect any specific mandates being made or if they will be enforced. But I think it would call to, like in the 1918 swine flu, there was a patriotic duty for folks to wear masks and social distancing and just do the right thing. But I think it's going to be dictated by science and what's really feasible given the situation that we're in.
I'd like to add more, Gina. You made me think of something important, which is, just the messaging. I mean, people are on this call today because they want to learn about vaccination safety. Is messaging. I don't know if we've done a good job messaging the safety of vaccinations. I had to go through like a 10-year, wrestling with it myself, right? I think in many ways, we as a country have done not a good job. We've done the opposite. We make people not trust us, not trust experts, not trust the science, thinking that pharmaceutical companies are behind it. And so we can develop a COVID-19 vaccination, and we think it's great, and it does maybe even more than we thought it would do, more than 50%. And it's a great biological weapon against COVID and reopening our country in many ways, and then we fail at the goal line. You got 1 yard to go, and you're on the goal line, and you can't get it in. Four downs, you can't get it 1 yard. We need to tell people, people need to learn, does it make sense for them to get it? And they need to fill in the answer for them in our country.
But I think as physicians, our patients are going to look to us, and they're going to ask us our opinions because it's already started. I mean, we get the patients ask us all the time in the office, well, what do you think? Should I get the flu shot? And, and we give them our educated information of why it's good for them to get it. Basically what we're talking about tonight. Why should we be getting the flu shot? And they trust their physicians to give them, the educated answer. And that's what we do. And they listen. So I think when we get all the information on the COVID vaccine, just like we have the information on the flu shot, we have to give them that educated information on why they should get it and all that information to give that the correct information. They're going to be looking to us to give it to them.
Mm-hmm. But it is, as I'm sure all of you on the call, either as a physician or a pharmacist or a nurse or whatever part you play in your family, there are so many sources of information, right? And it's a matter of kind of getting through it all. But I really do agree with both of you that when we have time to sit with our patients or have a forum like this, it's so important to educate them about what really is. But there's always going to be the few that no matter what you tell them, they're just set sort of in their way, but all we can do is try. And I think, have our actions speak for themselves. I have a personal example I can share. We talked about safety. So my husband was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome almost 20 years ago, and that is a ascending peripheral myopathy, or where he basically became paralyzed. And this can sometimes be associated with getting the flu vaccine, but it could also be associated with getting the flu itself or being exposed to travel diarrhea or something like that. Well, long story short, we had lived in Kenya for 4 years, and we had to get all of our immunizations before we went there. And I did a whole, I don't trust anything myself. I've got to look through all the data, and I had to say, do I immunize him? There's a chance of recurrence. And, looking through all the data and recent data, there is no increased risk really in someone that had GBS by getting another flu vaccine, so you have to kind of work through the data yourself. And sometimes it takes time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Overbeck, Dr. Moore, and Dr. Foglia. We do have a few questions. They kind of a little bit overlap regarding anti-vaxxers and effectively navigating the conversations on getting vaccinated, whether it's elderly patients or younger patients, speaking to the parents. But how do you navigate those conversations with anti-vaxxers, and how do you kind of reassure them and make them more comfortable to get the vaccines?
Dr. Moore?
Yes, this is a fun topic in the office. So luckily, we haven't had this occur too much. So in the few instances that we have, so the first thing I do is I ask, usually it's the parents, but the first thing I usually ask the parents is, I say, may I ask why, you don't want to get the vaccines, or why are you nervous about getting the vaccines? So I can kind of gauge an idea of what the concern is, and then kind of go from there. So I've had a couple of examples I've heard. Sometimes a couple of issues have been cultural, some cultural concerns, which you had to navigate around. And we've come around some ways to get around that. A couple of instances, it's been some concerns with the autism spectrum, which I'm sure a lot of us have come around to, and some information they read. Luckily, with most of the concerns or issues we've had with the parents, we were able to navigate around them, or come to some kind of agreement, through conversation and discussion. And I've actually brought up data with the parents and other venues. And we may not have vaccinated on a regular schedule. I've actually have instances where we came to an agreement with the parents and we did a delayed schedule, or we came, to a different way we vaccinated the children. But for most of the instances, we actually ended up getting those children vaccinated. Again, it could have been a very delayed schedule, but most of the children ended up getting vaccinated. We've only had a couple of families where we've had an issue where they absolutely did not want to get vaccinated. We went through, they understood completely what could happen. We went through to make sure. But again, most of the time when I've been able to speak to the parents and go through what could happen, the risk, the benefits, and we've come up with some kind of way to get those children vaccinated, whether it be with a delayed schedule or some way we're able to do it. So we've had some good turnout with those conversations, at least in our office. I'm sure not all offices have been like that, but we've been able to navigate through conversation and kind of getting through the idea of what the issue was and why, and kind of going through it that way.
For me, it's been acceptance of their position as valid. If they have a concern, then I have a concern, and trying to figure out ways that we can work together to move forward. And sometimes we don't. It's a flu shot and they don't want it, and maybe we'll get them next year. Maybe something like COVID sort of changes their mind and they say, you know what, this year is the year that I think I'm going to get my flu shot. Dr. Overbeck, can you be with me? Can you be available the day after if I have symptoms? I want to talk about it. So the first step has got to be acceptance of that their position and experience or thoughts about their own health or the health of the one they care for is a valid perspective. And when doctors do that, they develop that relationship for later. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and thank you, Dr. Overbeck. All right, so actually, I do want to comment on that and say you're absolutely right, that relationship, acknowledging the patient's concern, I definitely can appreciate that. And the next question I have is, on my family medicine rotation, this kind of was a little bit answered, but just in case any details were missing. On my family medicine rotation currently, I have seen several patients deny getting the flu vaccine, especially because of COVID. Do you think there is a larger protective measure to prevent COVID if we get the flu shot? I think it was kind of answered, but I don't know if any of you wanted to fill in the gap.
Yeah, so sure, I can fill in that gap. I'm not exactly sure why they didn't get the flu vaccine. I know if they were currently symptomatic with COVID-19, they would not get the vaccine. So if someone is febrile or under the weather, they normally wait until that part's cleared, right? But right now, we don't know if we'll have to see what evolves with our flu season. I can tell you what's happened in the Southern Hemisphere or in places like South America and Australia. They've had a really mild influenza season this year. And part of it, I think, may be based on COVID-19 and that there was more social distancing, there were more masks. So those same things that contribute to transmission of COVID could do it for flu. And if you're decreasing that, then you're sort of better off. Now, they're also looking at the fact, well, maybe more people were getting the flu vaccine because they were concerned about having a dual infection. But we still have to tease that out yet. And we're not going to know how that exists until we kind of go through the same thing here within the U.S. We still, I'm sure someone might have asked this, but we still don't know what a correlate of protection is with the COVID vaccine. So normally with certain vaccines like with flu, if you have a certain antibody titer or immune response of this and that, we know that you're probably going to be protected. We don't know what that correlate of protection is for COVID-19 yet. What we have seen in the Southern Hemisphere is that those that have made antibody or neutralizing antibody to COVID-19 seem to either have a milder disease if they do get infected. But we have to see how that plays out here.
Thank you, Dr. Foglia. The following question is, can you discuss the 2019 measles epidemics that occurred around the world, including the USA, and what it means for vaccine refusal in the age of misinformation?
Dr. Moore, I'll hand it over to you, and then I'll certainly be ready for any comments as well.
I'm going to assume the question is about the measles outbreak that happened in this past year with that question. So with that, we had that measles outbreak that happened in we had different hotspots that went around the country last year in different areas of the United States. So we were seeing that. We had a couple of spots in New Jersey, and we were seeing it more in areas where we had some groups or cohorts of people who were not vaccinating primarily. With that was happening. So we were trying to, we were trying to, but the health administrators were trying to get those groups of people to vaccinate because from there it was being spread to different areas. So on top, with that going on, we did have a lot of questions from patients coming in because they were concerned about that. And we were talking about them about making sure like they were vaccinated, which, most people were. However, we did have a lot of patients coming in asking to check their titers just to make sure they were still immune, which, we obliged, because we were fine with that. So we were making sure that patients were still maintaining immunity. Luckily, most patients were. From there, I think it did raise awareness more for people to get their vaccines. I did have patients asking about it. So in a way, I think it did help raise awareness with patients. And hand it over to you, Dr. Foglia.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so absolutely right. They found that the vast majority of people that had measles were not immunized, and they were able to spread it to people within their cohort because they weren't immunized as well. So they didn't have the herd immunity or enough people immunized that, you would protect others from spreading it with that environment. I think the second part of that question had to do with what can you mandate, right, and laws. And I know that in New York and other places, they did stipulate and they did have some laws or bills passed where people did need to get immunized or that they would not be allowed to school. And for something like measles, where there's a vaccine and it's very safe, it's been around for years and years. It just makes good sense. And just one thing I wanted to add, because I get this question a lot too about safety, is autism and mercury and the vaccines and all the pediatric vaccines that have mercury extracted years and years ago. But if you look at, the Institute of Medicine and other reports, that the number of autism cases still continues to go up, and it's not related to the vaccine because it doesn't have any mercury anymore, and it was just a very small amount of thimerosal. So there's something else going on there, and I think part of it is just people are more aware. People are making the diagnosis. Parents know what to look for as well. So
I will add on that, again, for the schools, I honestly cannot tell you in all the years I've been practicing so far, I don't think I've had anyone ask me to sign a form exempting them from vaccines to go to school. That there used to be an exemption form, I believe it was for religious reasons. I haven't had anyone ask me to sign a paper. And interestingly enough, at least in one of our courses at the medical school, we actually have a religion panel that comes in and speaks to the students. And one of the questions that always comes up in that panel is for the religious leaders is, is there any saying in your religion that says, patients cannot get vaccinated? And interestingly enough, all of them had said no. Interestingly enough. So we have not had them say that they cannot get vaccinated.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you, Dr. Foglia. The next question is, are you worried for old patients with the upcoming COVID vaccine?
I guess the question would be what does worried mean?
I'm assuming in terms of whether they might have stronger side effects, whether it would protect them or not.
Okay, I think one thing that we could add there, so I was just going through, and we'll share this resource with everyone at the end, but there's a really good site called Clinicaltrials.gov. So these are all of the trials that the NIH has registered that you can look up, and all I went through it in preparation for this. And what I've seen is that all of the vaccine sponsors are enrolling people right now, starting out with people 18 and above. So they are enrolling elderly folks to see what type of immune response they will elicit and also get an understanding of the safety profile for our older folks as well. So I'm not worried. I think it will be well characterized with these vaccine studies, but we don't know yet, and as Dr. Overbeck said, you have to give it some time for it to be in the population and the general population, because clinical trials are done according to a set protocol, right? When you get people sometimes out in the world, and things can be a little bit different, but for the most part, I think we'll have an idea over the next few years when it's in the overall population when we do have a vaccine.
Yeah, I don't really have a choice with my people. They sort of set up the shingles vaccine on their own, and 80 of them in one day. And I was worried that they're going to get some side effects, and that would be overwhelming. But they survived that; they'll survive this. What I'm trying to say is, it's not my choice anymore. It's the patients are demanding the COVID vaccine. So as soon as it's available, it's likely to come to my patients in a nursing home. If I had to pick, if I was a governor and I said, who gets the vaccine first? We just got a shipment. It would be nursing homes and assisted living. And my people want it. And so even if I'm like, well, can we just, they're already given, before I even get my sentence out, because they want it. And so, patients, when I say patients, I mean people, us, United States citizens are driving this and will make the choice. Is it right for me? And seniors, I think, are going to answer almost unanimously, yes, it is right for me.
And for everyone to know as well, this isn't kind of like a random assortment of who gets what. So there's a committee called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, who advises the federal government, the CDC, on what vaccines are recommended in the schedule that Dr. Moore showed earlier. And I can tell you right now, they're probably, given that we're not going to have all vaccines for everyone in the U.S., over 300 million people, but they are probably going to prioritize our most vulnerable, including healthcare workers on the front line, and also our folks in nursing homes or assisted living and that sort of thing. So, again, we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you. Following question is, since the flu season spans several months and can last late into spring, when is the optimal time to get the flu vaccine, considering its effects can wane after a few months?
Dr. Overbeck?
Well, we definitely had flu come through our building in some of the years before in April. We thought we were done. I mean, we thought no more flu. It's March. We haven't had any cases, and then there it showed up again April, and so I think that's a valid concern. I mean, what if it wears off? I think that it's flu season now. We do see flu in this area. I certainly know that we've had it in October, in November before. This is the time to get the flu shot. This is the season. I wouldn't delay and trying to just time it just right, like timing the market, stock market. I'm going to time it just right, get the maximum value out of my flu shot. Now is the time. It'll last you.
We actually,
and to add to it, go ahead, Dr. Moore.
I said we typically would give it like we used to get it like end of August and give it right away. This year we actually waited until a little into September to give it this past year. So we started giving it about 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Also, just a little bit on the science behind it too, is that normally when you have the flu vaccine, your antibodies, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to peak, to have a peak immune response, and it lasts for 6 months, a little bit more. So what happens is the manufacturers start to ship out flu vaccine the end of July, August, and it gets in the pharmacies. Because of what everyone just said before me, I recommend myself, my husband, my mother, my sister to get their flu vaccine in October. And that way they are protected for most of the season, or all of the season. If they're traveling to the Southern Hemisphere, I recommend checking what vaccine is used for the Southern Hemisphere, because sometimes it's not the same depending on the circulation of what's going on there. So you can check with the CDC website, and we share those resources with you afterwards.
Thank you. The following question is, do you believe, is the percent of effectiveness due to the lack of antigenic drift/shift for shingles compared to the flu, or is there another reason? So is the percent of effectiveness due to the lack of the antigenic drift or shift for the shingles compared to the flu, or is there another reason?
I think it always makes sense to sort of ask, well, why does the Shingrix come out to be 90% effective? What did they do right? And unfortunately, in healthcare, I always thought that I could study the science and learn the mechanism, and then I could predict the future. But what turns out more is we have something, then we measure it, and we say this is how it works, and then we try to figure out the reverse, why. I don't know. I can't answer you why it's 90% effective, other than I say that it is. And it seems to be preserved for at least 3 years and maybe 4, that it maintains its effectiveness. The reason why? Not sure. There's lots of reasons. There's lots of things in healthcare that are like this, that you get the measurement, you get the study that sort of proves it, and then you have to try to spend your lifetime trying to figure out why is it that way.
Yeah, and I think so I would agree, and I think with influenza specifically, for the question is we do have different circulating strains, and what happens sometimes is even within a season, like what we saw last year, you get circulation of maybe H1N1, and then later in the year you get H3N2, which could sometimes vary from what's in the vaccine strain. So that's why sometimes you get a mismatch, and the vaccine will not be as effective. One of the worst seasons we had for flu, Dr. Overbeck talked about this before, was in 2017-18, where in the over 65 was like 26%. Overall, it was in the 30s. And then we have a really good year where in a healthy person, you have a good match, it's like 75%. But even so, it really depends on the type of vaccine, because vaccines elicit different responses. If it's an antibody response versus a T-cell response, and there's a whole science there. But with flu, it does, and that's why we're looking at trying to make a universal flu, and there's research activity about that as well. So we don't have to keep immunizing every single year.
Thank you, Dr. Foglia. Next question is, do you believe that there could be a possible COVID-19 vaccine by 2021? If not, when?
So I'll take this. So based on what I know, based on what I read every day, I think, yes, there could be a vaccine by the end of this year. We've got 4 or 5 players now that are in phase 3. Many of them will have their safety data and efficacy data by the end of the year. I know the FDA has just provided guidance to industry that they would like to see at least 2 months data after their last vaccination to look at efficacy and safety. And based on those results, then they may allow emergency use authorization because we don't have anything else to, counteract the pandemic. So we'll have to see. It's kind of a, and then there's sometimes you can have a safety issue. So one of the AstraZeneca vaccine trials was put on hold for a brief period of time because the patient had a safety matter, but it was reviewed by the safety board. It was seen to be not related to the vaccine, so it moved forward. But all of the vaccine, all sponsors throughout the world, if they're going to try to license in the U.S., they have to follow appropriate safety and efficacy standards.
Sometimes vaccines are delayed coming out to market because they want to prove that they're safe. And then once they prove they're safe and effective, then they start producing it and distributing it. But I'm understanding from New England Journal of Medicine that they are actually producing it now, ready for distribution, so that when they prove that it is effective and safe, it's already there. So this is a financial risk the companies are taking in this unique time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I should also add to that. So usually, because it really takes, it's a lot of money and a lot of resources to bring a vaccine all the way into phase 3 and then have it approved. So what ends up happening is most people will wait until they have their phase 3 data and they submit their application to the FDA before they then start to manufacture. Right now, we're doing what we call manufacturing at risk, that we're actually producing vaccine, not even knowing if it's going to be effective in a phase 3. So, and that's why a lot of the different manufacturing companies, such as Sanofi and others, are partnering with the government to help with that risk mitigation. So that's one of the reasons why with warp speed, we're able to move things forward a lot sooner.
Thank you. Our next question is, why do some vaccines require boosters? Can you get a disease from the vaccine that's supposed to prevent it? And why do some vaccines have live pathogens, but others have killed pathogens?
I can answer, but I will defer to my colleagues if they'd like to add anything first.
No, you go first.
Okay, all right. So why live pathogens versus others? Well, sometimes like live attenuated influenza virus, sometimes the live virus, like if you're exposed to a natural infection, the body's immune response is revved up. It's a better response than actually getting it from a vaccine a lot of times. So sometimes there are live vaccines that we use. However, you have to be careful sometimes if you have a live vaccine and you have immunocompromised host. So, and there's guidance upon that. So that's why we use live versus inactivated vaccine. It depends on the pathogen. It also depends on the type of immune response that you want to elicit. The other part of that question, Zareta, if you would repeat.
Yes. So why do some vaccines require a booster, and can you get the disease from the vaccine that's supposed to prevent it?
Yeah, so sometimes, for smallpox, so being in the Army, I was immunized for that. And sometimes what can happen is because it's a live vaccine, it can sometimes cause some local or live sequelae. You can also sometimes in family households, they have been infected mildly because it is a live vaccine, but it's been a very, mild type of vaccine. So that does happen with live vaccines, and that's why you have to be careful if someone's administered a live vaccine. They shouldn't be with someone who's immunocompromised or immunocompromised themselves. The booster effect, which is very kind of telling right now, it's a great question. A lot of times, it's sort of, if you prime the body with something and then you give them a second part of it, it kind of revs the body's immune system up. And that's, in some of the COVID vaccines, that's what they're doing. They're actually giving a vaccine at day 0 and another vaccine at day 21 or day 30. And that's basically to boost the body's immune system. The other way to rev up the immune system, and it's used also with the elderly population, is with an adjuvant. And some of the COVID vaccines will have an adjuvant, which helps to build the body's immune system so it's revved up more. I'd also like to point the attention to also the older folks in this crowd. So I'm probably one of them myself at this point, but not quite, but for those over the age of 65, there are high-dose flu vaccines which kind of mitigate their body's reduced immune response when you get older, and they're either using a higher dose vaccine like we do at Sanofi Pasteur, or they're using a vaccine coupled with an adjuvant to boost the immune response. And that's what I recommend that my mom have for every flu season.
I would add that's actually a common question that we get in the office, especially from parents. Like, why do I need that second meningococcal before my kid goes to college? Or why do I need that, that Tdap at, 11 years old? And so it is a common question we actually do get in the office that we do explain the same reasoning to the parents about having that extra boost before they go and give them that extra protection before they go as well.
Yeah.
We were going to try to wrap up here, if that's okay, Dr. Foglia.
Sure.
But yeah, we could probably do another session on this, and great questions, and maybe we will. I do want to really just thank everyone who attended the evening webinar. We really hope it was beneficial for everyone to understand the process and development of vaccinations and bring some clarity about how to manage vaccinations for yourself and your loved ones. The session that we had today has been recorded, and it will appear on our alumni webpage by next week. So look out for that. And you'll also find past webinars on there as well. This is our third one. I really want to just special thanks to Dr. Foglia, Dr. Moore, Dr. Overbeck for your time, sharing your expertise on this topic. We really appreciate it. Thank you also to our second year SOM student, Zareda Laramont, for your participation and great work. Finally, just many thanks to our alumni webinar advisory committee members who are really guiding and shaping these seminars, as well as Ms. Gail Foreman, Ms. Nora Casper, and Ms. Brittany Quintana for many contributions. We're appreciative of input and feedback from so many to help bring the webinar series to you. So I want to tell you all about our next webinar for October, Thursday, October 29th. The program will be 6 to 7, and the topic will explore when to go to the ER and what to expect in the time of COVID-19. The program will be moderated by our own Dr. Vic Scally. I'll include a panel of 2 of our ER alumni physicians, Dr. Tracy Dodson and Dr. Michael Ruzak, as well as an ER nurse, Ms. Megan Martinson, to discuss when to go to an ER, utilization of ERs during COVID-19, safety precautions that are being taken at our hospitals, and consequences or outcomes of delaying ER care. So we're looking forward to that, and we're building programs for November and December, so we hope you stay with us. Once again, thank you for all your support of the webinar. Thank you to our physicians and our student on the panel, and I want to really wish everyone a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.